the done thing is to like premiere in London. And I thought, no, I don't really want to do that because I made the film in Portsmouth, largely with people who are from Portsmouth or are tied to Portsmouth in some way. We were supported by the people of Portsmouth. So I want to host the premiere here.
Hello and welcome back to the Blue Moggy Podcast. My name is Rachel Stevens. I am a writer, director, producer and all-around filmmaker, and on this show I'll be joined by other filmmakers, writers, illustrators and creators of media and visual art as they take us through their careers so far, share stories from behind the scenes of their upcoming projects, give tips and advice to you guys, and also talk us through how they got into whatever their chosen media profession is. This podcast is produced by Blue Moggy Media, a brand new media production company focusing on making and supporting film and media projects and the people who make them. On this episode, Portsmouth Director Adam Nelson joined me via Zoom to talk about his latest independent feature film, Mire, which is having its world premiere on the 3rd of February at the No. 6 Cinema in Portsmouth. If you are in the area and close by, you can get tickets to the screening. That is, at the time of recording, there are still tickets available. And if you are listening to this episode before the 3rd of February, of course. But if you want tickets to the film that me and Adam talk about in this episode, then go to www.no6cinema.co.uk. That's number6cinema.co.uk. Thank you to everyone who's listened to the first episode of the podcast and left any sort of feedback or comments. It's really, really appreciated. If you haven't yet, of course, go back into the feed wherever you're listening and check out that episode with Ben Grace about cine filmmaking. So using cine film cameras, how he set up his company, Camera Crate, which sells those kinds of cameras and accessories, and the production of his short film Lost and Found. But without any further ado, here is my discussion with Portsmouth filmmaker Adam Nelson. Hello and welcome back to the Blue Moggy Podcast. I'm here for the second episode with Adam Nelson, who's writer and director, and we're going to be talking about a feature film that Adam has made called Mire. Hello, Adam.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. In fact, you actually requested to come on the podcast.
Yeah, I do a lot of American ones, so it's kind of nice to not only have to do one that's in the UK, but also to do one that's like in the same area that I work. So it seemed like a really good opportunity to sort of spread the word.
We will get into talking about your feature film in a moment, but first you just want to give the listeners a quick little, who are you and what do you do?
So yeah, as you said, I'm a writer director from Portsmouth. I've not made loads of films. I've recently celebrated like my 10th year anniversary. I mean, it was this year, which kind of caught me by surprise. And I started reflecting on this the other day on Twitter, and I realised that I've moved very slowly for sort of like the first 10 years of my career, but that's because I've taken the time to sort of make loads of mistakes and learn from them and implement them. So over the past 10 years, I've only actually made 5 films, but 2 of those are feature films, 3 of them short films, one of which was a segment of an anthology. I am a writer-director, but I'm growing ever more interested in directing scripts written by other people. I've found I've had a bit more success doing that than I have directing things that I've written. I don't know why. It just seems to be that's the way that it pans out. But yeah, and I work on the South Coast in the Solent area. I make films in Portsmouth. It's a big part of what I do. I believe in localized filmmaking. I want to make films down here where I live and like where I know as a person, you know.
Similar to you, I don't, ever envision like moving to London to make films when like you can literally make films anywhere. You can make films at home, so you may as well like show your surroundings because like no one knows your hometown like you do.
No, exactly. And London's so like hectic. Every time I always say that I love going, but I can't wait to leave once I get there. because everything just moves at like such a faster pace than I do. And like you say, that no one knows these places like the people who live here. So it's nice to. I could go to London and make a film, but it would include all the usual places that everyone's seen hundreds of times before. Or I can make a film in Portsmouth and show people something they haven't seen before.
How did you get into film?
I didn't actually go to film school. That wasn't part of the plan. Making films was never really part of the plan. I liked films growing up, and what I really enjoyed doing as well was creative writing. And that's what I tended to be good at. I originally wanted to be an author when I was younger, because I wrote something for a creative writing piece when I was like 15. We had like a really boring creative writing task to do. And I wrote this piece about people being stuck on a boat hunting a giant squid. I unceremoniously steal everything from everybody and just stole Peter Bensley's The Beast and made it my own. And I remember handing it in, and I wasn't like the most well-behaved person at school. I was constantly in trouble. So when these creative writing assignments came back, I remember not getting mine back. Everybody else got theirs back, and mine didn't come back. And I thought, oh no, what have I done now? And then the teacher sat at the front of the class and read my piece out. And I remember everybody just kind of leaning in and listening, like it was silent. And that class wasn't silent, but everybody was quiet, everybody leaned in. And then right at the end, because I left it on a cliffhanger where I ran out of time, some kid who didn't like me, had no interest in me at all, turned and said, "So what happens?" And it was kind of like that point that I thought, oh, I might be quite good at this. So I originally wanted to be an author. My English teacher wrote in my leavers book, invite me to the book signing. And when I asked her if she honestly believed I could do it, she said, "Well, it's either that or I'll come visit you in prison. It's one of the two." And so I sat down when I was about 16 and I wrote a novella, which is about 20,000 words. And when you think about it, when you write a dissertation at sort of 21 years old, that's 10,000 words, and that seems like a lot. Yeah. So I wrote 20,000 words of this like horror story about a town that had been taken over by an evil force. And I was just really chuffed that I finished it, and I sent it off to a publisher who published novellas back then, because obviously publishing was a bigger deal back when I was 16. And forgot about it. And then about 5 months later, I got an email back from this publisher who very kindly said it was really impressive that someone my age had written this thing, but very politely told me that it was essentially unpublishable. But then went on to say, don't give up, because if you can write this way when you're 16, we can't wait to see what you can do when you're like 25.
Right.
When you've had a bit more practice at this and you've gotten a bit more used to it. Anyway, so heartbroken was I by rejection, I probably gave up. And that was it. I didn't write anything for ages after that. And I'd left school, and I sort of asked the guidance counsellor at school, like, what should I do? Should I go and do, I'm kind of interested in this creative media BTEC. It wasn't called the creative media BTEC back then, it was called something else. And she said to me, no, you're too smart to do a BTEC, go and do A-levels, which I did because I didn't know any better, which probably indicates I wasn't really that smart because I didn't know any better. So I just walked into South Downs College on like enrollment day and picked media, film and psychology. And that's where I really started to get properly interested in film, beyond the films that I watched all the time at home, which was your typical sort of, like when I was growing up, I loved Jurassic Park, Jaws, Terminator, stuff like that. But film studies at A-level really opened my mind to other stuff like in foreign languages, stuff from other parts of the world, really cool stuff. And then I came to the end of college and I didn't want to get a job. so I decided to go to university. And back then, you could like sign up to university at the last minute, and they would find a place for you as long as you got the grades to get in, which I did. So I was looking at courses, and creative writing was there, and so was film studies. And I was still kind of heartbroken by the fact I'd been rejected in creative writing. So I chose film studies, and I went to study film for 3 years from a theoretical standpoint. And I didn't really know what to do after that. So as I was leaving, it was kind of like, what am I going to do? And then I got a letter from the education department of the university, and they said that film studies was a really rare subject to have on its own, but it's getting a lot of sort of uptake in college. At college level, would I like to come and learn to teach? We will pay you £9,000 to come and learn to teach. And I was like, oh, you'll pay me. Okay.
So
that's what I did. I learned to teach. And all I ever wanted at that point was a job where I got to talk about film. So teaching film studies seemed absolutely ideal.
Yeah.
Did that for a bit. Wound up teaching in Guildford. And at that point, there was a change in the guard. The financial crash had happened. So everything public spending wise was being reined in. And I was told, if you want to keep your job, you've also got to teach people how to make films. And I played around a bit with cameras and editing stuff when I was at college and when I was at university, because there were practical elements to the course, but only, you could choose to do them. You didn't have to do them. And I've made some skateboarding videos and, experimental stuff, scribbles and so on and so forth, but nothing that I really thought I could make anything with. But when I was asked if I could teach filmmaking, I didn't want to lose my job, so I said yes. And voila, I'm a filmmaking teacher. And I met a man called Simon Westcott, who had a long and distinguished career in television, especially in broadcast news. So with that kind of environment, he knew what he was talking about. And he took me to one side, and he knew I think he knew I was kind of winging it. And he said to me, the thing to remember is you watch loads of films so you can talk to the students about how their films are put together. The rest is all stuff you can learn. You can learn how to use a camera. You can learn how to use the editing software.
Yeah.
That's all technical stuff that can be learned. The instinctive filmmaking side of things, those are the things that you have because you consume a lot of films. And he was right. And I sort of took that and ran with it. And I taught myself how to use what was Final Cut Pro 7 at the time. That's what they were using at the college. Taught myself how to use all their cameras, and then applied that to like a wider selection of cameras. Never really learned enough to be brilliant at it, just enough to stay ahead of the students. But I understood framing because I understood how it worked in film from a making meaning perspective. And I understood editing and different types of cuts and how they were used to create meaning. And those are those are the skills that are sort of universal and that really need teaching, because anyone can put a camera down and tell people to do something in front of it, put it in a computer and put it in roughly the right order. It's like the minutiae and the meaning stuff that really sort of sells it. And then 2012 rolled around, and we had a better sort of brand of students. We'd kind of built ourselves up this better sort of intake of students. And they started asking to see things that I had done, and I had nothing to show them. So I thought, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to make stuff so I can show them, if I want them to take me seriously. And at the same time, I'd had an argument with my boss about something that wasn't aimed at me, but I took it personally, about like dedication to the job and so on and so forth. And I was like, well, I'll show you. So I took a couple of students and a couple of people that I knew who could act, and I wrote a short script about a friend who had just passed away, or it was loosely about a friend who just passed away. You wouldn't know it if you watched the film that that's what it's about. And I took a couple of students and I made it. And when I'd sort of finished it and I'd put it together and I'd done the fine cut and I'd given it a very basic color grade and sound mix, I was like, actually, this is all right. I think I've done all right here. So I sent it off to some festivals and it got into one or two. And this is before there was like a massive explosion of film festivals. This was when, there were sort of very specialized ones. And then sort of blogging online about film reviews and film was just kind of starting to emerge. So I contacted a couple of them because no one wants to read random people on the internet's reviews of Predator because everyone's seen Predator, So I was like, I've got this film that I've made and I'd like to get some reviews of it. And it's only 5 minutes long or 6 minutes long, however long it actually is. And a couple of them said yes. And I kind of expected them to say it was a bit waffly and a bit silly and, and such. But the reviews came back really positive as well. So I was just like, oh, maybe there's something in this. I wouldn't mind having a go at making a go of this and making a proper go of it. But at that point, I was about 26, 27, and I thought, I'm getting on a bit. And I didn't mean it in terms of I'm old, but there were people who would be leaving university who had a lot more experience than I did, who would be, able to do far more than I could do. So I was just like, I need to do something proper. And I watched Chris Nolan's first film, Following, which he made for $6,000. And I thought I could do that. I could make something for $6,000. I would write something. And I listened to the commentary and he was talking about how he wrote a film that involved locations he knew he could get.
Yeah.
With actors that he knew would be available. And I was just like, I could do that. I could put aside $6,000 over the course of a year and I can nick the equipment from the college over the summer because they won't care. They're not open. And I reckon I could do this. And so I sat down and I wrote an 84-page screenplay called Little Pieces, which I stole the idea from a song. I stole the structure from Following, by which I took the song idea and then I cut it up, put it into a non-linear order. We have castings and I cast actual actors, qualified actors, people who'd actually done acting and taken it seriously. And then I took a bunch of students who had just graduated from their second year or the really good ones from their first year. And I, over the course of the back end of July and all of August 2013, I made my first feature film. I shot it. And I blagged an ice rink for an ice skating scene, and we dressed the college up a little bit, the construction part of the college up, so it looked like a warehouse manufacturing plant, and went into the staff room and dressed it up so it was like the break room at this manufacturing plant, and I did all the costume design myself, and I did it. I decided I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it, and it then took a year and a half to edit and put together and do the sound mix and so on and so forth. So we didn't actually finish the film till 2015, but it was absolutely worth it. We premiered it in London at the Institute of Contemporary Art, which was pretty impressive. It got nominated somehow. It played in a couple of festivals, and a lot of the early reviews were really impressed. And then kind of as people were like, oh, I've got to watch this and review it because so-and-so said, it kind of tapers off and the floor stuff coming to the surface and such. And it's not a great film, but you can see what I wanted to do. And the ice rink scene is fantastic and is still possibly the best thing I've ever done. Because I had the wherewithal, not only had I blagged this ice rink, but then when I was in there, I knocked on the door of the staff thing with the guy who had to stay behind, the supervisors. and we'd been shooting from like the side, and there was no movement, there was no energy, there was no connection. So I just said to the guy, "Look, can we stick our DOP on the back of the ice cleaner, and you follow them around?" And he was like, "Yeah, all right then." So our job had to sit on top of like the gas tanks of the ice cleaner, but he followed him around the ice. He followed them around the ice rink, and this guy like had absolute control of the. So it was like we had a dolly on the ice.
Yeah.
Followed them around, and like that scene is incredible, and people like still talk about that scene, like no matter what review it is, whether it was a positive one or a negative one, people talk about that scene really, really well, and like talk about it. And then it got nominated for like this like crazy award, alongside big films, like The Danish Girl and The Macbeth with Fassbender in it, and 45 Years with Charlotte Rampling, and another film that had Harvey Keitel and Michael Caine in it. And I was just like, I have no idea what's going on here, how this has happened.
Yeah.
Like they called me up and told me about it, and I asked who it was and why they were winding me up, because I didn't believe it. You know, my little $6,000 back garden indie film.
Yeah.
I thought it was my best mate had put someone on to like wind me up, but no, it was true. And off the back of that, I got someone else's money to make a short film that I'd wanted to make, that someone else had written that I'd bought. And that was quite terrifying. The first time you have someone else's money, that's really quite terrifying. Because then you have to deliver or give the money back. And if you've already spent a load of the money. But that was a great film experience because I got to make a film with a proper crew. And it was... the final film is really good. I'm really proud of it. It's called Emotional Motor Unit. The experience making it on set was difficult because I was kind of transitioning from this kind of DIY, like pull everything together ourselves, to a more professional approach where people were like, "No, that's my job. You don't do that. That's what I do." You know, and we had to replace the DOP at the last minute because the other person got a gig for like Coca-Cola, I think, or something like that. And so everything was a bit kind of juggling and not up in the air. But the final film, I'm really proud of, and I learned a lot from that experience because it was so kind of awkward. Like after that, I was kind of like, maybe I'm not cut out for this because I've like, whilst I've done really well on this kind of DIY approach, I've kind of stuffed it when I had to act like a professional. So I wasn't really sure about it, but filmmaking's like an itch. You know, like you got to scratch it.
Definitely,
And,
yeah.
So I still liked writing. I was writing a lot of scripts at the time, and I'd got hired to write a script for a biopic that I can't talk too much about because it's still in financing. But when that thing goes, it's really going to go, and it's going to be awesome. Like some of the names I've heard sort of thrown around are incredible. I can't believe those people are going to be like saying words that I wrote, sort of thing. But Emotional Motor Unit was made in Portsmouth as well. That was my first time making a film in Portsmouth. Little Pieces was made in Guildford, where I was based at the time. And I saw in a Portsmouth filmmaking group a thing from Rob Ulitsky. He was putting together an anthology about addiction. And I had this little script set in a toilet about a man who's got a parasite in his stomach and it eats his way out of him when he's on the toilet. It's like pretty gruesome, silly stuff. But it was based on like a really awkward experience I had in a public toilet where like the guy in the cubicle down the end of the thing sounded like he was having a fight with something and then just went deadly quiet right at the time that I finished up what I was doing and flushed him.
No.
But like that kind of germinated this idea about someone having a parasite in them, and you know, I kind of stole a bit from Alien, a bit from Dreamcatcher by Stephen King, and I reworked the script for Rob's thing where like the guy's just eating and eating and eating, and made it a bit funnier. Rob DOP'd it for me, and Tom Byrne, he produced it and helped us secure locations. And I got to work with someone that I'd not worked with yet, but I wanted to, and work with someone that I work with a lot and really enjoy. And it was the most fun I'd ever had making a film. Because it was, for me, it was a film for me, even though it was technically for Rob. Rob was just like, do what you want. I don't care. Like, make the film you want to make. So yeah, I made the film I wanted to make, and I had the most fun. It was the only time I've ever enjoyed. Up to that point, I'd enjoyed the entire process. Because I always find being on set a bit kind of like, oh, everything's moving too fast, and I'm not really creative. It's just about getting stuff done. Whereas like pre and post is all about crafting and having ideas and bouncing ideas around. That's the stuff I like. But we had that for this, and I just had so much fun doing it that I was like, yeah, let's like, this is awesome. Rob sent the stuff off to an editor he knew called Jake, who just made the film fantastic. Like, it really is a sign of how good editing can be when you have someone like Jake working on it, and he sort of brings it all together and shows you your film. I was halfway through like a director's cut, and I saw Jake's edit, and I was just like, no, I can't do better than that. And that premiered in 2019. And of course, we all know what happened after that.
Yeah. So having already made a feature film, how much did that help you with planning for the Mire?
A lot. The one thing that I really walked away from Little Pieces with was managing the energy levels of actors and how they differ and what different actors need. And also making sure that everyone's making the same film that you are and is on the same page that you are. Because I had an actor on Little Pieces who was not making the same film we were. And it was quite a difficult experience going through that, especially for like someone who, it was my second narrative piece. It was my first time working with professional actors. So I really learned a lot about making sure in advance of the shoot, spending a lot of time with the actors. And really, that's where my strength lies anyway. So that's the part of it I really enjoy. I enjoy crafting performances and so on and so forth. Because as I said, when it comes to the technical stuff, the camera stuff, I know enough to be able to communicate with people and tell them what I want and what I'm looking for. But I don't know enough to tell them how to do their job. And really, realistically, I shouldn't have to, because, you know, the director of photography, for example, is called the director of photography for a reason, because that's their job. Like, they're in charge of the look, and they formulate that look based on their discussions with me and what I want and what I'm looking for and how I see the film. So that was what I really learned, was how to make sure that everyone's on the same page. How we don't have an experience like we had on Little Pieces, where we turned up for the first day of the shoot and the actor starts saying the lines. And there's a lot of lines in here that I hadn't written that weren't in the script, and no one seemed to know what was going on. When we did the table read, I said, look, it's okay if something doesn't quite work. If you've got little tweaks and adjustments that you think will make it flow better or work better, you know, feel free to do that. You know, that's what this whole exercise is about. The individual in question took that and ran with it and tweaked and adjusted their part so that it was about a third longer than it had been in the original script, and had a whole lot of extra backstory and additional stuff into it that was all coming out on the set. And so that was a real learning experience. It was frustrating at the time, but reflecting on it, it was just like, well, you know, this is something I need to get a hold on as the director. This is something I need to have. And I've not had that issue since, because I enjoy collaborating with actors. Back then, I was a bit kind of like, actors are a bit weird and I don't know how to talk to them. But now some of my favourite people and my good friends are actors, and I really enjoy hanging out with them, and I get how to communicate with them and talk to them and such. So that really helped, because going into the Mire, where we didn't have a month and a half to shoot 90 pages, we had 7 days to shoot 90 pages. I had to make sure that every single one of the actors knew exactly where we were, knew exactly what film we were making, and exactly like what the baseline for the performances needed to be, so that when we were on set, it was just tweaking little bits and pieces.
I was going to ask, how did you approach it? Did you do rehearsals, or was it just...
We couldn't, because everything was locked down. So we did a lot of stuff via Zoom. We did a table read via Zoom, which was great, because we were able to hear everything and we kind of realised that one of the characters was underserved by the structure of the film, so we were able to go back and make adjustments there. But a lot of it was just long conversations on the phone, and each of the actors needed something slightly different. So Holly, who plays the Hannah character, we had an initial discussion, and she said, all right, it lasted about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And she said, all right, I've got it. We're on the same page. I now need to go away and go through all this and figure out what I'm going to do. And then we'll have another discussion closer to the shoot to fine tune everything. Joe, who plays the Marshall character, he had lots of questions that he wanted me to answer, and I answered them as best I could. And sometimes I had to say to him, like, I'm going to have to go away and have a think about that because I'm not quite sure yet. And that was really helpful and really kind of expanded my toolkit, because having someone who asks lots of questions allows me to explore things creatively in a different way. My phone calls with Joe lasted about 4 hours at a time. We'd have lots of in-depth talk about the character, lots of in-depth talk about choices that he wanted to make as the actor and whether or not I thought that fit in with how I envisioned the film. And then Anthony, who plays the Joseph character, we had a really long conversations that varied from the lines of dialogue in the script to how he was just feeling about the character, because he's a method actor, so he takes on a lot of stuff when he takes on a character. And like, we would talk for like 6-7 hours at a time, just going through everything, talking about him, talking about the character, and that was a really fascinating experience. I'd have liked to have done some rehearsals. I'd have liked to have got in the room, but before we were first supposed to shoot, everything locked down again, proper tight, and we weren't allowed out to do anything. And then what we found was, as we approached the actual shoot date, everything just started happening really quickly. We just didn't have the time to fit everybody in. We couldn't make everybody's schedules line up, because people had to take time off work and take time out from their schedules to come down to Portsmouth or to come over to Portsmouth and shoot. Holly lives in Fareham, so she had to take time off of her day job to come over and shoot. Joe was one of the 2 members of the cast and crew that didn't come from Portsmouth, so he had to come down from London, take time out from what he was doing. Ant works a lot, so he had to book a big slot time off for his work, and we just couldn't make those schedules line up, because if they needed to do that, have the week off to shoot the film, then their employers weren't necessarily like, we'll let you also go for a couple of days a few weeks earlier or a week earlier and such. So it was kind of tough to line that up. I'd have liked to have done rehearsals. I'm experimenting on something, a film I want to make in February. I'm going to experiment with doing rehearsals on Zoom and see if we can make that work, just to see if it can sort of come together. But I'm not as confident as I would be if I was in a room with someone, I think. But yeah, that was the biggest thing, balancing actors and sort of bringing everything together. And yeah, working with them and really fine-tuning those was a big help. Jordan and I, the cinematographer, we just clicked from our first meeting. We just clicked, and we'd spend sort of half an hour talking about the film and then descend into an hour conversation about films we both like, and then come back to the film and then descend into an hour-long conversation about films we like. So we just kind of, we were on the same page before we'd even really started discussing the film, which when you work like that with someone is fantastic.
So we sort of started getting into a bit about how you made the Mire, but I don't think we've covered yet sort of what the Mire is about. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, the Mire is it's a 95. It's definitely a 95-minute feature film. It's a thriller. It's a contained thriller. It's about a cult leader who has convinced all his followers to give him all of their money and earthly possessions of any value, because they're not going to need them when they, what he calls, ascend, which is his way of saying mass suicide. He has no intention of going through with it. he's going to run off with the money. But his ego, he wants them to know they've been had. His ego won't let it stop. So he goes back to set up this big reveal that he's tricked them all. And in doing that, his two most loyal followers, who are already concerned that something was wrong, they go looking for him in the church where they're based, find him in there, dressed, ready to go, with a bag of stuff that he's taking to sort of get rid of. And they realise something's not quite right. So they trap him in the church, and then they go through the process of what's called realignment, which is where they try and bring him back into the fold. And he realises, whilst they're going through this, that all the tricks that he's used to manipulate people over the course of the years that he's been doing this, to garner up as much money as he possibly can, no longer work, because they're so committed and so believe in what he's going to, that every reason he has for not being quite there and not being fully committed to it has an answer, because he's used those answers on people who have started to stray away before. And so over the course of that evening, it becomes like a battle of wits. They're trying to bring him back into the fold. He's trying to get out of it. And through flashbacks, we explore how this man has managed to manipulate two, who should be reasonably intelligent people. He's managed to take them at their, like, when they're most emotionally vulnerable, and manipulate them into doing his bidding. And and then obviously it all comes to a head just before the mass suicide is meant to actually occur the next morning. But that's the long-winded explanation of the film. It was, we wanted to do something contained. We wanted to do something that was kind of locked into one location so we could bubble if we needed to when we were making it, because that was the only way you could really make films at the time.
Yeah.
Chris, the writer, had sent me a screenplay that was set in a freight elevator, and it only had a cast of 2. And I was like, I can make this. I could definitely do this. And I said to him, let me price it up and let me see what I can do this for. And as I was putting the pricing together, Bastard sold it to someone who offered him like a decent chunk of money and said he could do it with a decent budget and get this television star in it. And that film has then gone on to be called Stalker, premiered at Fright Fest this year. But he kind of felt a bit guilty about it. So he was like, I'll write you something, like, as an apology. What are you interested in? And I gave him this kind of laundry list of things. So, but I'm really interested in cults, and I'd like to do this thing about cults. Oh, and by the way, when I was scouting out locations to build this freight elevator set in, someone sent me this church, and I want to set it in this church because I've already built a relationship with the people there, and I know they'll be up for it if we do it. So I sent him like literally the schematics for the church and all the rooms in the church. So he was writing a script with the location already in mind, which was a new experience for him, definitely. But it really helped build the visuals of the film because we already knew what the locations were going to look like. We didn't have to scout. We knew where we were going to be filming it. And it was a bit nerve-wracking going into that second meeting at the church and saying, the film's changed. I want to make a film about a cult. I was fully expecting them to say, get out, leave. But no, they were up for it. As long as we didn't get any of their branding in the film, they were up for it, and they were great. Like, they let us take over the place more or less for a week to film the thing, and it was fantastic.
How great to just say to someone, I want to make a film about this in this place, and then they just go, here's the script.
Chris works like ludicrously fast. He sent me an outline in the middle of August, a treatment and an outline, and Tom and I went over it and then had a conversation with him about it, and like we adjusted some things and changed some things, and then gave the treatment back to him and said, go ahead and write the first draft. And I had a first draft about a week and a half later, and it was a good first draft, which is kind of quite rare. And then we just kind of tweaked with it and adjusted it as we went on, and we developed new ideas based on the location and based on like realizing that one of the characters was kind of underserved as we did a read through, posted up that character and such. But yeah, it was really great to know that when it said main hall, we were in this room, and we could take that, we could have that room for 2 days and schedule all those scenes together in like one block. And when we were in alignment room 1, we were going to be in this room. We had that room for 2 days, and we could just put everything in that room and leave it there. And then, so it was, we finished on the first day, and it was all ready to go the next day because like not much really changed in the rooms in terms of the layout. And we had really small crew, a lot of volunteers from the university who said it was a great experience and they really enjoyed it. And we owe them like big time, because without them, I don't think we'd have done it.
Where did you find the crew? Was it people you'd worked with before, or a bit of a mix of new?
So I'd not worked with Jordan.
That
Jordan
was the DOP.
Yeah, he came via Tom, who I had worked with before. I worked with him on Toilet Humour, and like we had a conversation and we clicked. It was like fantastic, and that's the type of person you want to work with. Chris, I've known for about 5 years. He was one of the first people to review Little Pieces when it came out, and he said some really kind words about it, and we've just kept in touch over 5 years over Twitter. And during the first lockdown, he said he was looking for eyes on this script in an elevator, and I was like, yeah, I'll have a read. And like the actual sort of professional relationship started there and went from there. The composer is the person I've worked with on everything. So I love Imran to bits. I really do. He's a fantastic composer, and he makes my work better. And so much so that when he couldn't do Toilet Humour, I chose not to have music in it instead of work with someone else.
Oh, really?
Jake, the editor of Toilet Humour, put some music into it that he'd gotten from I don't know if it's royalty free or not. I don't want to insult him if he composed it, but he put some music into it. But I chose not to have a proper score because Imran couldn't do it. And then Jake cut Toilet Humour, and I was so impressed with his work that I asked him to come on board and do the Mire. And again, we had a conversation and we just clicked. And that's the type of people you want to work with. You want to work with people that you click with and that you just have an instant rapport with.
And what about the actors? Again, was it people you
Anthony,
knew? Or?
I knew. Anthony had been in I Am an Addict. He did like the bookend pieces of that anthology film, which I wrote for Rob. And I was so impressed with what he'd done with those bits. I was just like, I think like when I read the character Joseph Layton, I was like, it's him. He's the one. Everybody else, the other two roles we put out an open call for. And it was really hard, especially to find the Marshall character. We had about 7 people. We had loads of people apply. We narrowed it down to about 7 for each one. For the Hannah character, we found 2 people who was really, really good. One being Holly and one being someone else. And I could have closed my eyes and like thrown a dart at a dartboard, and it would have been a good choice. Whoever had gotten the role, she'd have been fantastic. But Holly was just ever so slightly more in line with what I imagined than the other person. Marshall was a lot harder. We saw a lot of people, and there was almost a bit of a falling out over it, because we met a guy who I liked, and I thought he's about 60% of the way there, and if I work with him enough, I can probably get him to 90%. And we were running out of time. This was just before everything locked down again, and we didn't know we weren't going to be able to shoot. So we were running out of time, and I was like, we need to cast someone, and I think this is the best bet. And Tom probably rightly said, this has got to be right. We've got to get this right. So And then he came back with Joe, who wound up playing Marshall in the film. I saw Joe's showreel and I was just like, yes, I'll see him. Let's see him. Let's put him through. And Joe came in. He did both bits of the audition, the first piece and the callback, in one go. And he was just spot on. Like, he was fantastic. And I gave him a bit of direction, and he interpreted it perfectly, and went with it. And so, like, we offered him the gig the next day because he was so spot on. And he is spot on. Like, he's fantastic in the film. So yeah, we went for a more traditional casting process with the two younger characters in the film. But Anthony, I just read the script and I knew it was Anthony. And he's loved it. Like, he really took it on and really went with it. So yeah, that's how we found the cast. And yeah, it's just, apart from that, it's people that I sort of met and clicked with, or contacts of people that I know. Because we wanted people, primarily we wanted people that we could feel comfortable with if we had to sort of lock down and all live in a house together, because we needed to bubble and such. But it was great. It was a great crew. A sound recordist came from a recommendation from Anthony's agent, and he does a lot of TV. We saw a couple of sound recordists, and the first thing we said to them was, we're doing a 90-page feature film in 7 days. And I said this to everybody whenever we interviewed them. And, you can tell by their reaction to that statement whether they're right for the gig or not. And we saw one guy who was really good and really qualified to be the sound recordist. And I said, we're doing this 90-page film in 7 days. I don't know if we can do that. And if you go into it with that attitude, then you're not going to be able to do it. Whereas Jack was like, yeah, I do telly. This isn't a problem.
But yeah, TV's so different. They do crazy amount of pages a day.
Yeah. So we knew then, Jack was the right choice, because he'd come in and said, yeah, I can do this. We can do this. It's not a problem. Whereas the other chap was, I don't know, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it. And if you go in with that idea, you won't be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. If I didn't think we could have done it in 7 days, we wouldn't have done it. And people asked, and people did look at me like I was mad, and I was just, nah, we can do this. It's all in one place. We can do this. When we did a unit move, we only had to move from one room to another. We didn't have to move across the city.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, we can do this. We'll get 2 cameras and we'll just go. We'll make it happen. And we did it. We got it all first time round, and then we went back and we reshot some stuff that wasn't quite as good as the rest of the footage we had. And we were like, we need to do a bit better, because what we've got is really coming together well. We need to go back and make this better so it fits in with what we're doing.
So obviously the Myers are independent, completely independent in terms of finances. So you wasn't trying to raise finances. You're just like, this is what I've got. This is what it's going to cost. We
tried to raise some. Tom got us $1,000 as a grant. He managed to secure a grant for his business, and that went into the film legitimate. And it's a legitimate thing. It was about expanding the business and growing into new areas. And his business hadn't made a feature film before, so he pitched it as that. We did some crowdfunding to put it all together. There was a little bit of private finance, but nothing that we had to commit to. There was nothing from a studio or a company. It was from people that we know. A lot of the money actually comes from America. During the crowdfunding campaign, we met very generous couple of lawyers from Chicago who contributed about 1/3 of the money overall, if you look at it. So it is quite possible that we've laundered money for the Chicago mob, but I don't care as long as all I have to do is spend it.
Were you using Indiegogo? Or?
We we did a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo that lasted about a week, and then everything locked down. We'd raised about $1,000 of what we were asked, about a quarter of what we'd asked for at that point from that campaign. But everything locked down, and I was just like, we can't ask people to give us money when they've just been told they can't earn any money at work. So we kept it running, but we didn't push it.
Yeah,
really.
sure.
Didn't push it really hard. And then Tom got the grant. We raised a little bit of private money, and then we had to get about $4,000 just to fill the gap. So we set a date to shoot in October, and then I have like the summers off. So I said July and August we're going to run a crowdfunding campaign, and I'm just going to push it because it's like a full-time job doing a crowdfunding campaign. Like, you can't half-ass it. You've got to give everything to it. So we went through Greenlit, who are film and theatre specific. That's what they focus on. So you're not fighting for people who fighting with people who make gadgets and fighting with people who make who want to make books and so forth. You're with people who make films. So the people who go to look at there as a place to sort of support projects are already looking at films. Greenlit were really helpful. They let us run the campaign privately for about a week so we could accrue some money before it went public. And we found a really generous donor who gave us £500 to start the project. And she was fantastic. And she put in a little bit more throughout the campaign. My dad put some money in. And then like a lot of our friends and colleagues and such contributed. And then, we stumbled upon Camby and Idia from Chicago, who just kept putting money in. And that was great. And we were able to shoot off of that. And then when we realized, like, we've got to go back and get a bit of tidying up money, and that cost us a certain amount because we had to rehire the rooms and such. We had to raise another $2,000 to finish post. As a result, but that money, like, that came in, people like came back because we had a near enough finished film. And what we did was we sold tickets to a sort of like a test screening watch party thing, and then we used those as a means to get feedback on the film.
Oh, that's great.
To improve the edit.
Yeah.
We reached the point where Jake and I were just like, we don't know what else to do with this. Like, this is it, but something's not quite working. So it was time.
Did you get a lot of people buy tickets for that? Because that's a fantastic idea.
It was a fair few. Like, it wasn't loads and loads. But what we offered it up as was a chance to see the film. We streamed it over 4 nights. Because we had some people in Australia and Japan give us money for that. And so we had to do a midnight screening for them here. And that sort of served as a test run. Like, does the form for feedback work? Does the streaming stuff we're using work? And then we did 3 nights across the rest of the week. And we offered Q&As after that on Zoom. Not as many people turned up for the Q&As as tuned in to watch the film itself, but I think we wound up with about 60 people watching it, and we got a lot of good feedback. And because it was all anonymous and done on a form rather than in the Q&A sessions, the feedback was really valuable. And then Jake and I sat, and I collated all the feedback and presented it in a document for Jake, and he and I sat and went through it. And we sort of, like, the first question was, based on what you've seen, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how would you rate the Mire as it stands? And I'd have been happy if we got 5. If people sort of said, like, it's out of 5, because I felt it was kind of out of 5 at this point. But people were saying 7 and 8, and I was just like, oh, blooming heck, we maybe we really are onto something here. Like, this is good. And then we went through the feedback. We decided what was useful for us in the edit, what wasn't useful for us in the edit. A lot of people said that there were 2 main points where they felt the film was a bit too slow and eased out. So we went in and adjusted that. And we watched that and we were like, oh yeah, that was the problem. That's exactly where the problem was. So it was a really helpful situation, and I would definitely do test screenings again as a result of that, to get people's feedback, because ultimately, like, you as the filmmaker get to, at least in the way we did it, we got to decide which feedback we took on board and which feedback was like, no, that's going to be contrary to what we want to do.
That it's funny you say that. I remember sort of early on in my career writing, sort of having to sort of say to myself, you don't have to take everyone's feedback, like get feedback, but it's actually okay to just say, I'm not going to use that bit.
Yeah. When I give notes on people's scripts, which I don't do very often, you know, I will, when I send the email with the feedback, it's always, I don't tell them what to do, and I don't necessarily offer specific advice on how to change specific things in the screenplay. Instead, I say, this bit worked for me, these bits didn't work for me.
Yeah.
This is why they didn't work for me, but it's up to you to decide what you do with my feedback, because, you know, I think there's a lot of people approach giving feedback, especially on screenplays, and other screenwriters give feedback where they're like, if I were doing this, I would do this. And the problem with that is they're not the one doing it, you are.
Yeah.
So like their idea might be completely contrary to the whole story you're trying to tell. And then it's not going to work because it's not something you're passionate about.
Did you have a plan for what you wanted to do for the film after it came out before you made it? Or was it, let's make it and then see where it can go?
I have a producer friend that I'm working with on this big biopic who used to work in sales. So I contacted her and said, look, what would you do if this was the idea you wanted to make? And she gave us a lot of really helpful advice and put together a list of distributors who might be interested in it. So I looked at a more traditional route. Tom has done some research into self-distribution options that we might have, should it come to it. Before we'd shot a frame, before we had anything going, I contacted the people on this list. Most of them came back to us with send me more information, send us a visual deck of it. So we'd put one of those together before we'd even contacted anyone, sent those off, and then off the back of that, most of them came back and said, this looks really interesting. We're not buying anything in advance of it being made at the minute because we've already got a backlog because of COVID. But we would be interested in seeing the final film when it's done. So that gives me a lot of optimism that there is a home for it and that people will be interested in it. That was when we were still planning to make something quite quickly and put it all together and then sort of shove it out the door. That was before we realised quite what we had and spent an extra 6 months fine-tuning it and editing it and putting it all together and really going for it. So I'm not 100% sure where this will stand now, but I think it's a better film than what I kind of pitched to people when I was sort of pitching this pitch deck at them and saying, would you be interested in something like this? We've submitted to some festivals to see if they get in there, see if it gets in there. I'd love to do kind of like what we're doing with the premiere at the number 6. I'd love to do like a sort of mini tour around other independent cinemas, like on the South Coast and up north, and just say like, hey, we got this indie film that like sold X amount of tickets at the number 6 in Portsmouth. So like, if you put it on, like we'll push it and we'll go for it and we'll come up and do a Q&A, or one of us or some of us will, you know, let's do it. Let's go on a little tour. So I can then go to the distributors who showed some interest and say that, like, I have hard data that this is a film that appeals to.
Yeah, numbers work very well. If you can say this many people paid money to watch the film. Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode wanting to do this podcast because we're both in the Solent region and how you like filming in this area. What do you sort of like about sort of staying close to home?
Well, it is my home and it's in my blood. And I can write ideas and scripts that are tailored specifically to the city. One of the scripts that I'm kind of toying with at the minute is a real time story that's set in Portsmouth, and it's about someone who's trying to get from one side of the island to the other before he bleeds to death, basically. And because I know Portsmouth and I know exactly how it is and what sort of route someone would take, I can be so specific about it in the script. That won't sell it to anyone on a wider level, but I wouldn't be able to do that in London because I don't know London well enough. But I can do it in Portsmouth, and I can take in sort of like the breadth of the city. Such, I think, you know, there are creative people down here, and like there's room for a creative industry working in Portsmouth. Portsmouth University, in particular, like it's like one of the few universities in the country, I think, that's like actually endorsed by Screen Skills. And so like loads of people come in for 3 or 4 years, train up, and then go away. And it's like, why are we letting this happen?
Yeah, Southampton's similar.
Yeah. You know, why do we allow this to happen when we can be doing stuff down here? Like there are creative people here who want to tell stories and want to make films. And that's like partly why I wanted to make the Mire the way it is, because, you know, it's like I want to show people like this is what we can do. We can compete with like the grown-ups in London. We can compete with them down here. We can make something that is really good. Why don't people take us seriously?
When we were catching up the other week about recording, you also mentioned sort of a unique look that filming in Portsmouth has.
Yeah, Portsmouth's a really weird city because obviously it was bombed in World War II. So you've got parts of it that are proper old worldy, sort of pre-World War II, down in Old Portsmouth. And then that is, because it's a city that can only grow upwards, it can't grow outwards where it's on an island. Those are butted up right next to like really modern looking buildings. We're about to get our first skyscraper apparently in the next 5 years or so. Then you've got like rows and rows of terraced houses in really narrow streets that feel quite claustrophobic, and then like big wide open spaces along the Eastern Road, which are right up against the sea. It's like you can walk 5 minutes in any direction and be like in a completely different looking area to where you were when you started. And like that's fantastic because you've got all this different stuff in really like tight locations. So you don't have to move around lots. You don't have to move to the other side of like a 10-mile stretch to get to a location that you want for an exterior, because it is like right there. It's like, you know, you just walk up a couple of streets and go, there you go. When we were making the Mire, like we sent Tom down to the seafront with a second unit to shoot some bits down there. And like they were able to go down to the seafront, film those bits, come back to the church in like next to no time, because it's all just there. But the seafront looks very different from where we were filming in Somerstown. And I think that's fantastic, and it's a positive, it's a benefit. You know, like we have a unique look of a city, and then you know the central areas where it's all commercial and student based looks different still. That looks really modern and sort of kind of all, I want to say funky, but I don't know if it's the right word for it, you know. But you know, it looks different. It looks kind of cool. Yeah, I just think that's a real benefit to the city. That you're never too far away from something you want to film, like a good exterior. You've got the Guildhall, which is this beautiful old building, and then you can walk up the road and be in a high-tech office complex. Fantastic.
And the King's Church, so the location for the Mire, that was something you already sort of had, well, as you said, sort of inspired the story, really.
Yeah, it's a very cinematic location, but the best thing about it was they had everything we needed under one roof, because we knew one of the things about filming the Mire was we knew we were doing 90-odd pages in 7 days. So we knew we wouldn't be able to do massive unit moves around. We had to get as much under one roof as we possibly could. And the only spaces we couldn't get in the church was the office space that we wanted to use. Originally, they said we could do it because originally everything was closed down and like they had no one coming into sight. But by the time we got around to filming, everything had opened up again and they had people working in the offices and they were like, look, you can't disrupt our work. But that was fine because literally like a 10-minute drive away is the Groundlings Theatre and they're not open on a Monday. So they were like, you can come and film in our office. It'll cost you this much. And like, so we were able to do a morning at the church and then move to the Groundlings. And then in the Groundlings, they also had a bar, which we also needed for a scene. So again, like that, there's that compactness. Like, you know, we didn't have to do a major or difficult move. It was just like 10 minutes over, you know, to the other part of the city.
Which, as you said before, helps so much with shooting as many pages in a day over a short period of time.
Yeah, but the church was like their main hall is beautiful. I'm almost worried that we didn't utilize it enough in the way we shot it. But you've got to serve the story, and we only had so much time and such. But and they were great, and like a big part of outside looks fantastic. It's got this kind of beautiful old. It's sat in the middle of a bunch of terrace houses and student accommodation now. But outside, it's this beautiful kind of. I'm not 100% sure of the era, but like the main hall of the church just looks stunning, and we were able to take that and film the exteriors, and they gave us free rein. Like they were fantastic for that. The only time we ran into an issue was they double booked a birthday party, a Nigerian birthday party, on one day. So we were literally filming these sequences where people were moving around corridors and such as this birthday party were coming in behind us, and we were just kind of like, please don't walk in front of the camera, just for we need it for 5 minutes. But they were great, and that was wonderful because they saw what we were doing and how hard we were working, and they fed us. So we didn't have to go out and buy lunch that day. We ate Nigerian birthday food, which was fantastic. But it's just a lot of different locations all in one space. It feels cohesive, but it doesn't feel like we're repeating ourselves throughout the film. It doesn't feel like every room feels the same. But it feels cohesive enough that you believe it's one location. And that was great because you don't want it to feel like you're, you know, just shooting the same room, but from a different corner each time you change rooms.
Yeah. So we've talked about how, like, it might not seem like it, but there definitely is a film community in Portsmouth and in Southampton, and we've got these great locations. But what do you think the sort of challenges are for our area?
People don't take it seriously.
As in the people that live there, or like
people from
money?
Other areas don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to make films here, and I love making films here, but I ain't daft. I know I've got to go to London and meet people, and so I do that. You know, before COVID, I tried to go at least once a month, but post-COVID, not quite so much. But I've gotten in with this like really good kind of group. You have to be invited to go to this networking event, and there's like a lot of really cool kind of people there. And I hear two things quite frequently. One, I'm paraphrasing a lot of feedback, but the most common thing I hear is when I introduce myself and say, I make films in Portsmouth, the most common thing I hear is, oh, we didn't realise films were made in Portsmouth. Like, no one knows. And this sounds facetious, and it kind of is from the people who say it, and I am paraphrasing a lot of different bits and pieces, but someone once said, and this has summed it up for me, was I said, I make films in Portsmouth, and the guy said, oh yeah, I've seen films made in Portsmouth. They look like they're filmed in your nan's living room. And I was just kind of like, well, to be fair, we're going to make the films we can make with what we've got, and if that's your nan's living room, then that's your nan's living room, you know. And I just think that like that lack of taking us seriously is kind of catches us in a loop, because people don't take us seriously. So no one comes down here to spend money. So because no one comes down here to spend money, we make films in our nan's living rooms.
Yeah.
Which means everything like gets kind of caught in this vicious cycle. You couple that with the fact that we've got a kind of a city council that in some ways can be wonderfully helpful. The licensing department are giving us a certificate for the Mire for free. They're going to watch the film and give us a certificate for free so we can open the premiere up to the public, because they recognise that it's a small film and like we don't have the money to pay the BBFC fees because they're ludicrous. And they're really helpful. But if you want to go and film something somewhere and you talk to the people who set that up, they're just kind of like still tied to the fact that we had Les Mis come down and film in the dockyard in like 2010 or whatever it was, and everything's still kind of priced at that level. And I remember I wanted to film like 2 shots for Emotional Motor Unit, someone walking out of a building and walking up a road, and they wanted like half the budget of the film. Like it was about $5,500 for me to do that, because they were going to stop all the traffic and block everything off. And I was like, no, I don't need that. I just need someone to walk out a building. I'm going to be 40 minutes tops. I don't need you to shut everything off for like a morning. Like there's no dialogue. Literally it's me and a camera operator and the actor. That's it. And they were like, well, that's the price. And I was like, well, I'm not going to pay it. I'm going to go I'm just going to go and do it. And they're like, well, we'll put someone there to make sure you can't do it. Well, I'll go somewhere else then. It's a big city. Like, why are you making this so hard for me? Because now, like, all you're doing is encouraging me to go somewhere else and make films, rather than encouraging me in. Like I'm a small film. I've got this much money. I need to spend this much on the cast, the crew, the locations, and all that. This is what I can offer you for the permits. You need to be a bit more flexible. And they did the same with Toilet Humor when I first tried to make it. Like they wanted $5,000 so I could film in a toilet that's closed overnight. It's crazy. It's crazy. So that doesn't help either, because no one wants, like some people are really helpful and other people are unhelpful. When we were shooting The Mile, I tried to get parking permits for outside the church, and it was crazy. Like what I had to do was mad. So I found out that if I wanted these parking permits, I had to get the church to apply for them. So I went to the church and said, can you apply for them? And they said, we will, but they'll say no, because they always say no to us, because we're not a resident, we're a business. And I was like, Christ. So I emailed like the parking people, and they advised me to park everything in pay to use car parks that were like a mile and a half down the road. And I was like, I ain't carrying everything from there and leaving all the vehicles there when I can park out front. I'm not doing it. Like, what other options are there? And they were like, well, you can come in as the business to get parking permits for this. You can get them from the library. Like, it's fine if that's like. So I went and I presented myself as the head of Apple Park Films, and I was doing this thing, and I needed to make it, and I had this name from parking, and I needed this many parking permits. And the people in the library were like, oh no, you have to get it from the business that you want to park outside of. And I was like, that's not what I've been told. Why does everybody know a different thing? Like, how does this happen? So eventually they called parking. Parking gave the okay. I got the tickets. And I remembered that they said I had to be from the business I wanted to park outside of. So when we did the reshoots and I had to get more parking permits, I went back in and I pretended to be from the church, because I ain't above line to get what I need. And they said I had to be from the business that wanted to park outside that was doing the work. And I was like, what? It's not that the left hand ain't talking to the right hand. The left hand and the right hand are in a different room on a different person, So that's a challenge as well. No one seems to know what they're doing down here. And all that's going to do is push people away, because they're going, oh, well, filmmaking's hard and I don't need bureaucracy to get in the way of it. So that's a challenge as well. And there are people who are trying to work on this and are trying their best to kind of sort of bring everything together. But it's tough, and that's another reason why people, that's not going to encourage people to come here and spend money to make films here, because why would they do that when everything's charged at Les Mis rates and no one seems to know what's going on? Yeah. So those are the biggest challenges, I think.
So the Mire, it's all finished, getting ready for your world premiere in February, and you're sort of still waiting to find out about whether it's going to get picked up for a distribution.
Yeah, I haven't sent the final screener to anyone yet. I want to premiere it because we've made the premiere an event. The done thing is to premiere in London, and I thought, no, I don't really want to do that, because I made the film in Portsmouth, largely with people who are from Portsmouth or are tied to Portsmouth in some way. We were supported by the people of Portsmouth. So I want to host the premiere here. We submitted to the Slam Dance Film Festival because they only take, they're like Sundance's younger sibling, and they only take films from first or second time feature filmmakers. So I was like, well, it's now or never, because I'm never going to make a second film again. So it was possible that would be our world premiere, but they get thousands upon thousands of applicants, and sadly they turned us down. We sent a very early version of the locked cut, so they saw the locked cut but without much of the score or the color grade or the effects and so on and so forth. And obviously, that being tied to Sundance, it's kind of elite. You'll be really, really good, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So at that point, it was just, I decided I wanted the UK premiere at least to be in Portsmouth. It's now the world premiere, which is even better. And I met with the people who run the Number 6 cinema in Portsmouth, who have been very supportive in the past. And I said, I want to make it an event. I want to make it a big thing. I want to invite the people of Portsmouth. I want to sell tickets. I want to really push it. And I want to get it out there, and I want to make it a celebration. And so we kept ticket prices low. We settled on £6 a ticket, which is really good. But we gave it kind of like a sort of smart casual dress code, so that no one feels intimidated and don't feel like they have to get fully dressed up. But if people want to, they can. It gets me out of having to do it.
I was going to say, are you getting all dressed up?
I will wear smart casual clothes that look nice, but I never feel comfortable in a suit. So if I don't have to do that, the better. And I want people to see it. And so we got a press campaign lined up. We've done pushing with our friends and family and our social media circles before Christmas. It looks like Clan Nelson is going to descend on the place, so that should be interesting. Imran, the composer, he sold tickets to some friends and some family. A bunch of people are inviting their friends and family. They're all coming. But after the new year, we really want to start ramping it up and saying this is available to everybody. Come and see something we did.
Yeah.
And so the news are interested in covering it. Express FM, which is based in Portsmouth, they're interested in covering it. Contacted a bunch of other news outlets that are sort of specifically Southsea based. We cut a special trailer for the Number 6, which has the UK premiere at the Number 6 at the end of it, and they're going to run it in front of their films in January.
Oh wow!
So that their target audience knows that it's coming. And I want to sell it out. I want to be able to say to everybody, look at this, look what we did. We raised the money for it when people said we couldn't do it. And now I want to sell the cinema. I want to sell the cinema out when people are kind of oh, we might not do that. I want to do it just to prove that it can be done and that we can do it, because I am viciously ambitious when it comes to things like this. Yeah. And if I can go to there's a small cinema in Chichester, and there's a small cinema in Bognor, and there's small cinemas dotted along the way. I think the Picture House in Southampton's probably a bit ambitious. It's kind of a bit probably beyond our means. But I want to be able to go to these other small cinemas and say, we sold 277 seats out at the number 6 in Portsmouth. We can do that here. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Because why not? Like, every time I get to go on the merry-go-round again is a gift. So like every time I do it, I want to take it as far as I possibly can, because there is a very good chance I might not get to do it again on this scale. Because who knows when I'll get to make another feature film.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm going to start contacting distributors, because, you know, if I've got figures I can show them, like, you know, they'll be more interested in it. But I'm hoping to play, you know, we've applied to a bunch of festivals in London, and I'm hoping to be able to invite people that I know in the London sphere and be able to say, hey, come look what I did.
Yeah.
Come over to this. I can do it as well as you can. Let's go. Come on.
So that's the 3rd of February, number 6 cinema. So if people listening to it, if there's still tickets available, just go to the website. Yeah,
it's on their website. Like, that was a great moment of pride for me as well, logging onto their website and seeing like what's on, and like there's my film listed on a cinema.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a private function like it was at the ICA when we premiered Little Pieces, where we rented their cinema and just invited loads of people. Like, this is like, people can buy these tickets. They're there. It's listed. Like, the public can see it. Like, that's like a real sense of pride for me. Like, because that's, I've never done that before, and that's something I can point to as like a step in my career. Look, my film is like listed on the cinema's website. The next one is I want to go into HMV and be able to pick up a copy and go, here we go, look at that.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll get to do that with the Mire as well.
So do you have, at the moment, are you just focused on the Mire? Do you have plans for what will be your next project?
I am making a film in February. It's another little film for me. I read a script.
As in a short film? Or
it's a short film.
Yeah.
It's a short film. I was looking to produce a script, because I can produce and direct, but I don't like to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And Holly, who's in the Mire, was like, was saying, "Oh, I wouldn't mind directing something." And I was like, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll produce it, and like, you can direct it, and I'll help you with all the logistical stuff, and then you can just make the film you want to make, because I understand like the value in that." And we started looking for scripts, and my friend Jane, who is another person I've never met face to face, because I do a lot of networking online, and like that's where the majority of my network is. She writes things that are very micro budget, can be filmed in very short periods of time, you know, usually 1 or 2 locations with 1 or 2 characters. And I asked her if she had anything, and she sent me this script, which is like a flip on the scene in a zombie movie where someone gets bit and someone has to kill him. It's like a flip on that. It's really cool. I read it. I was just like, I really like this. And Holly, it didn't gel with Holly. Holly didn't kind of click with it. And I was just like, I'm really glad you've said that, because I want to do it. And so I contacted Jane and asked if I could do that. She said yes. And so I'm now getting to work with 2 actors who I haven't worked with for a while, that I really enjoy working with. Jordan's going to shoot it. Imran's going to do the score on it. I think I'm going to cut it, just because Jake's worked so hard on the Mire. I don't want to throw another thing at him and say, I need you to do this for nothing, please. Again, because, you know, he's worked so hard on the Mire. And I have very little money to do this. Like, the deal with the people who I'm working with is, I will make sure you're not out of pocket. But this is one for us, you know, we're doing it for us, sort of thing. But I love it. We're going to shoot it in a day. I'm going to experiment with doing handheld, because I don't do a lot of stuff handheld. I like to shoot on sticks, so we're going to do handheld, shoulder mounted, and then I think I'll cut it together. I'll just take my time with it and like sort of get it to where I want it to be, and then either I'll color grade it, or I'll find someone who's looking for a bit of color grading experience to color grade it. Color grading is not my forte, but I'm keen to learn. And then I am attached to direct another short film that I can't talk too much about, which is like the biggest thing I've done yet. Like the budget is huge. Like
for a short film.
For a short film.
Oh wow.
I could make the Mire like 4 times over with the budget of this short film. And it's possibly the first time I'll get to work with named actors. And like we're really going for it. And again, it's a friend of mine. She wrote an amazing script. We sort of set ourselves, we're in a little writing group, and we set ourselves a challenge to write a script that we thought could win an Oscar, and make it. And I think it could do it. It's really good. The script's really good. A friend of mine who's producing another film that the biopic, she's come on board to produce it. She's already started applying for grants and so on and so forth. And I'm well up for it because I've only done genre stuff since I did Little Pieces. And I want to prove that I can direct drama and direct it properly, and it not come off as like hokey and melodramatic and silly like it does in Little Pieces, because no one really knew what they were doing. I want to prove I can do that. So it's a challenge for me. It's going to bolster me up again in terms of things I haven't done. And then hopefully off the back of that, or off the back of the Mire, I'll be able to get another feature sort of on the run, because I've got 4 or 5 ideas that I've got ready to go if people want to see them. Like they're in good spaces in terms of the writing. It's just a case of like showing people like, this is what I've done with no money. Imagine what I could do with, a budget.
So we're getting towards the end of the episode now, but as we're currently recording this a few days away from the end of the year, I thought it'd be a good time to just sort of have a little look back of how the year's gone, especially like for Blue Moggy Media. We like to focus on learning and sort of sharing our progress. Is there anything, although you've sort of been doing this for 10 years now, is there anything you've learned this year or especially proud that you've achieved?
I think to be a director, you've got to be a bit of a control freak. You've got to want to be in charge. And that makes perfect sense given the role of the job. But the biggest thing I've learned is to kind of let go of that need to control when I'm working with people who are more talented at their job than I am. And I did that on the Mire, on the shoot with Jordan as the DOP, and I did it again in post-production with Jake. Rather than sit and do my own work print first and then send it to him and say, right, make that better, I gave him the files, I gave him all the data, and I said, I just want you to focus on making the most commercially viable version of this film you can. I'm going to cut my own arty-farty director's cut, but I want you to just take this take the raw materials and go, and send me the first cut when you think it's ready. And I let go of that level of control. And what was quite interesting was he sent me a first cut that was almost like identical to my own. It was really similar, a little bit shorter. And like there's one sequence that we shot as a oneer. We also shot coverage, and he cut it as coverage, but I put the oneer in there. But that was the only major difference. Like the rest of it was really similar. So I kind of really learned to sort of let go and say, right, Jake's based, like when he did the first cut, he was in the Caribbean, so I couldn't sit over his shoulder and tell him what to do. So I just let him go and trusted him and trusted his judgment, and we'd have discussions. And sometimes we disagreed, but he was always very good at then saying, all right, but this is what you want, so I'm going to do this. Like it wasn't a case of arguing or fighting over it or him running rampant. We'd have discussions and sensible chats about it. And that was really good. And letting go of that level of control meant that the process was a lot easier for me. I didn't get quite stressed about it.
And is there anything going into the new year like a particular goal you want to set for yourself, something you want to learn? You mentioned color grading. Would that be one?
Yeah, I'd like to get better at color grading. Like, I'd like to have a go at color grading. Frankie gets bit just so I can play around with it. But I'm fully expecting that someone else will do the final one. I color graded little pieces, and that film looks like someone poured a load of paint over the film stock and went for it. But I didn't know what I was doing. I did it because the person who was meant to do it wasn't able to. So I'd like to do that. And yeah, I would like to produce something. If Holly decides she wants to do it and goes for it, I'd like to produce something. And I'd like to, I'd like to start work on a third feature film with a proper budget this time. Like that's the big goal ultimately. I don't want to lose the momentum that I've now got. And getting nominated for an Oscar for a short film towards the end of the year would be pretty good. Like, that'd be a nice.
Yeah, be all right. Do you have sort of any helpful quick tips for anyone who's about to go ahead and make their own independent feature film?
Yeah, and so I think first and foremost, focus on making the film you can, not necessarily the film you want to make. Because like there are films I want to make that I know I can't make now, so I don't focus on those. I focus on the films I can make now, and I think that's an important step. I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea of I want to make this. It's like cool, but you can't. Maybe you should make this. Secondly, is to remember that like the whole thing is a game, and you have to play it well. This is something that only really sprung to mind earlier when I saw something that someone posted on Twitter. Like making the film is only half the job. Like the rest of it is getting people to see it. And like the way you do that is by establishing a network of people who help you spread the word. And that's what I mean by playing the game. Like you got to go out there and you got to make contacts with people in the local area who'll spread the word. Local press outlets, local radio outlets, local sort of websites and blogs, people who will spread the word for you. And you've got to play their game and be nice to them. Because I see a lot of people who want to make films and go to like local press outlets and say, oh, I've got this and I would like you to promote it. And then news doesn't run anything on it. And then they go and they slag off the news on their like Facebook socials and Twitter socials and all that and make a real big show of it. And then like 3 or 4 weeks later, they want something from the news and the news turn around and say, no, and it's like, you're going to get what you give in that respect. You got to play the game, as it were. People do favors for people they like. That doesn't mean you got to let people roll over you and like such, but just remember that it is a game and that making is only half the battle. Like the big fight is getting people to see it. And for that, you need everybody, not just other filmmakers and such. And the third piece of advice, and this is the best advice I ever got, and I think this is this advice applies to people who are just starting and people who are well into it, and that's wear comfortable shoes. Because you are going to be on your feet all day when you're making a film, so wear comfortable shoes.
I'd top that and say, if you can, have a spare set of shoes and change them when your feet start to get a bit tired.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on the podcast and talking to us. Where can people sort of find you online if they want to know more about what you're up to?
So I'm quite cryptic. I don't have a website. I am on Twitter. I'm at Apple Park Films. And that is just me running that. So it's not like a corporate account. Like occasionally I try and sell people stuff, but it's usually just me like talking about films and stuff I like and such. So like come and say hello. You'll be talking to me, not some other person who I've paid to run it because I can't afford that. And I'm on Instagram. I'm Instagram.com/Adam.Nelson7. I don't like having my picture taken, so you won't see a lot of me on there, but you'll see stuff to do with films I've made and occasionally food that I've made as well, because I like to cook. But
And
that's it really.
And if you're listening to this before the 3rd of February, go to number6cinema.co.uk and see if they've got any tickets left for the world premiere of the Mire.
We would love to have people come. Like, the more the better. Everybody is welcome. We anticipate the film will be a 15, so everybody over the age of 15 at the minute is welcome.
Okay.
Like, there's no way it'll get an 18. There's no way. If it gets an 18, I'll be mortified. Like, I won't understand.
Okay, well then that would just about do it. Yeah, again, thanks so much, and talk to you again soon.
Yes, definitely.
Well, that's almost a wrap for another episode of the Blue Moggy Podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all those of you who have subscribed or liked or followed or left feedback. There will be more episodes of the Blue Moggy Podcast to come, although at least while we're still in these early stages of the podcast, it will be maybe a bit of an irregular releasing schedule for the time being. But if you follow, subscribe, and check out the social media channels for Blue Moggy Media, then you will get those notifications when the new episodes are coming. If you have any suggestions for topics for episodes, or maybe you want to hear from a writer or a video game developer or an illustrator or a graphic designer, then let me know so that I can bring those to you sooner rather than later. But for now, I just want to say another thank you to my guest, Adam Nelson. Wish him all the luck with his film, The Mire. I will be going to the premiere and I can't wait to see it, and catching up with some other local filmmakers, or local to me anyway. And I wish Adam all the best and hope that The Mire gets a big release and that you can see it in some other cities around the UK as well. And once again, Justin, if you can just play us out one more time with the Blue Moggy theme.